What is the most horrifying thing you've ever witnessed? Story 1. My father committed tragic end a while back using a shotgun slug to the head. He did it in the garage. My brother and I cleaned up the mess as best we could after the official cleaners were done. We kept noticing a smell though. After a week or so, we really got down and pulled everything out of the garage. Wedged behind the dryer was a large section of brain. Hard to forget that moment. Story 2. Was getting a fountain drink at a convenience store and on the way out heard a thud along with screeching tires. Looked in the middle of the road and saw some object that looked like a cardboard box. Looked to my right and saw that an SUV had its hazard lights on and was slowly pulling into the store's parking lot. I slowly realized that the cardboard box was a person, and I ran out to see if the person was alive or dead. From his body, and his arm was twisted in a way that I knew it was dislocated. I'm positive he was in shock. Thank God someone showed up and relieved me of my duty and started waving at traffic so no one hit him, because I was far too jolted to do anything other than ask that asinine question. Story 3. When I was 7, my mother was violated by 2 junkies she was friends with, in front of me. We were homeless due to her complete mental breakdown. She had gotten pregnant with a man she was in love with, but for reasons still unclear to me, he left. She decided to give her son up for adoption, and then suffered a mental breakdown. She lost her job, our apartment, and refused to work towards getting her life back. She succumbed to severe adult beverage abuse and nearly cost us to be removed from the homeless shelter we stayed at. Sometimes, in these drunken states, she refused to go to the shelter for the night, forcing me to stay up with her and whatever guy she was clinging to. These binges would last days at times. Mostly this meant sleeping in cars for a couple hours at a time. On that particular night, some friends she knew from years before wanted to party, and that meant heroin for them. Mom did not take part, I don't think. She did, however, get stupid tipsy. She was blacked out, not passed out, for hours. They drove us to a park and her 2 friends sprawled her on the grass under a tree and both had a go at her, all the while her screaming for them to stop. I was in the car asleep, but obviously watching. Later they were back in the car grinning about how tight she was. She swears she remembers none of this, which is understandable given how disgustingly tipsy she was. First grade was pretty rough. Story 4. Responded to a call about a gang fight in NW Detroit. 7 cars, respond 10 cops, arrive on scene. When I get there, people are scattering from the flashing lights, and there are not enough cops to start chasing a gang of 30 people without riot gear or a larger police presence. Basically, we're there to break it up and secure the crime scene. At the center of the cabal is a dude naked face down, crying in the fetal position. Turns out it wasn't a gang fight, it was a gang violation in the middle of the Fudge Street with 30 people involved in one way or another. Turns out the victim was trying to get out of a gang and they didn't like that very much. He lived. Story 5. Prison. 1 inmate refused to pay another after losing a bet. The other guy put petroleum jelly and some other gels and liquids in a cup in the microwave for 5 minutes, and then threw it on his face as he was watching TV in the pod's rec room. I've never heard a more horrifying scream, and never saw someone thrash around so much. Story 6. I watched my father die in front of me in our backyard. We were cleaning up and doing some general landscape type of stuff when he went in for some sodas. He came out and dropped a soda and then picked it up and sat down to drink it. I turned to him and he had soda dripping from his mouth. When we got to the hospital, they told us he'd had a catastrophic stroke and blood leaked to his brain. The rest of his body was still working, so they had to put him on a morphine drip, and he officially passed later that night in hospice. I still play it out in my head. He'll have been dead 6 years on June 5th at 10:10 p.m. I miss him so much, and even more now that my wife and I are trying to have a baby. Story 7. Tie for me. Watched a guy on a motorcycle get propelled into the side of a car or being in the passenger seat of a car that hit a 12-year-old girl. First, I was sitting in my car in a parking lot near the head of a T-shaped intersection. A guy was driving pretty quickly across the top of the T in one of those crotch rocket motorcycles, a Honda, I believe. A girl in a Hyundai didn't see him and made a left turn just as he was about to cross the intersection. He got launched headfirst into the side of the car. I was about 150 away and could tell from where I was sitting that he was in really hard shape. His bike was wrecked, and he was in a really unnatural position and twitching. He was quickly swarmed by people trying to help him out, so I drove away rather than watch the aftermath. I learned from my aunt, who is a nurse at the local trauma center, that his spine was severed and he died later that day. A few years before that, I was in the passenger seat with a friend of mine at the wheel. We were on a 4-lane road in the middle lane. We crested a hill to see a guy in the outside lane with his brake lights on. Just as we were approaching him, we saw a girl's leg come out from in front of his car. He has apparently stopped to let her cross and thus blocked our ability to see her. My friend jumped on the brakes and tried to swerve, but there wasn't any room. We hit one girl and she came through the windshield and basically landed in my lap before being propelled off the front of the car when we finally stopped. The second girl got hit in the arm by the mirror of the car and was thrown back. The mirror collapsed. The happy ending was that she got away with a broken leg and arm and no lasting injuries. My friend was driving a lowered sports coupe, and with the nose ducking of a hard braking maneuver, she was picked up on the car instead of under it. The guy who stopped to let her pass was charged and sued. My friend was credited with a very quick reaction that probably saved her life. He wasn't speeding, and situationally, there's very little he could have done to avoid the accident. The most horrific thing was that the car literally picked her up out of her sneakers and left them neatly on the road 20 in behind the car. I was in the process of getting my license at the time, and I couldn't get back behind the wheel for 3 years. Edited for typo. Story 8. 4 years ago, I was a prison guard in southern Iraq. As much as our efforts were in keeping our detainees from escaping, we kept them from eliminating each other. Tried to, anyway. One night the escape alarm sounded. Happened every now and then. It was standard procedure if a compound was missing a man. I was in one of the response forces to this particular radical compound, and a riot nearly broke out when we performed our search. Obviously, they were hiding something, and it turned out to be what remained of our missing man, a victim of an impromptu Sharia lynching. Both forearms and sheens were shattered. His right temple was crushed, an eye popped out, still hanging by its optic nerve. He was covered in over 100 stab wounds, most likely from nail-sized shanks. According to the doctors, he died from bleeding out, possibly over the course of hours. It was in a big compound, but to this day I wonder how the guards didn't notice. Edit. Yama, per request. Story 9. Watching my brother die of AIDS, pulling the plug on my ex's daughter, who had just turned 18 and had been hit by a truck on her bike. She lay in a hospital bed surrounded by pools of blood on the floor. A homeless guy who had frozen to passing and was still frozen as we lifted him, sleeping bag frozen to him but limbs sticking out, into the morgue van. Story 10. Saw my best friend of 13 years get hit by a tipsy driver going 58 mph. He flew through the air, and the resulting sound was absolutely terrible. What was worse is that he didn't die on impact, so I sat there and watched him as he cried, and eventually left me, and then had to go tell his mother what had happened. Needless to say, There were quite a few horrifying sights that day. Story 11. I saw a guy fall over on his bike a few cars ahead of me in traffic. He had fallen with his head under the tire of another vehicle. His brain popped out and was several inches away from his head, mostly intact. Answer: yeah, that's horrifying, all right. But I have something worse because it was my best friend right in front of me. I was on my motorcycle heading to my friend's house on a big 6-lane road at night. I pulled in to get gas, and just as I was leaving the gas station, I saw what looked like my friend's motorcycle. I didn't know he was just heading home from the gym on the same road I was. It was just a coincidence. Seconds later, I see an accident scene ahead. The moment I saw the bike, I knew who it was. It was my best friend, lying in the road, lit by headlights, pieces of his bike. Everywhere. The way he was twisted, I have never seen a person. His right arm was bent the wrong direction. His left arm was shattered. His left leg was a million pieces, basically just encased in skin. He still had a helmet on, and blood was flowing out of it. I was watching my best friend die in the street in front of me. Thankfully, an ER nurse was one of the first cars stopped. I'm a photojournalist, so I started taking pictures, documenting it, while shaking and trembling in tears. The accident had been a dreaded left turner, where a car just turns across right in front of you. He was going maybe 50 mph at the time, 10 feet before the impact. There was just one dark line of locked tire, then blam. His body hit the side of the truck at high speed as the left side of his body shattered and bones turned into splinters. I started calling people immediately, everybody who was within a 30-minute radius of the accident. I remember calling my brother and telling him, "If there's anything you need to say to Andy, you need to get here now." It seemed like it took forever. He was lying in the street for half an hour as paramedics worked on him to stabilize him. As I stood over him, his eyes opened. He recognized me, kept whispering my name, but he was completely out of it. I told him I'd take care of things. Then I had to call his mother, who was 3 hours away. If he was going to die, I knew she wouldn't be able to make it in time. So I told her he's in bad shape, but they're doing a good job on him, and she needs to get up here now. Then the helicopter came. He was airlifted to the hospital as close to passing as I've ever seen a person outside of a funeral. He was in surgery for more than 10 hours the first day. He endured at least a dozen surgeries after that. He was in ICU for 20 days. He was in the hospital for more than a month. He lost 30 BBLs just in the hospital on IV and fluids. He was on a hospital bed in his own house for 2 months. He walked after 2, with a titanium rod in his left leg surrounded by a slowly regenerating bone. The accident stopped his studying for a law degree for a year, but he went back to law school after he was well enough. He graduated the top of his class, summa cum laude from the University of Florida. His father, who flew from Argentina to help his recovery, died the final year he was in law school. My friend is now a top lawyer, working for a federal district court less than a year out of law school. To this day, he hasn't regained the use of his left arm and hand. Hopefully, one day, he will. He used those photos I took to sue the driver who turned in front of him. The driver was Chinese. He fled the country and didn't come back. I remember being on the side of the road that night, not knowing who had hit him, and I saw a witness who I later learned was the driver telling the cop that my friend was going so fast he didn't see him. My friend was doing the speed limit. The son of a meanie was trying to sell out my dying friend while he laid in the street. So yeah, it's my dream that one day my best friend will get justice from that guy who nearly eliminated him and then left the country like a coward. But until then, my friend is just fine being one of the best darn lawyers in the country. Story 12. When I was in second grade, I witnessed Hindu rioters cut off a Muslim rioter's head with a sword in the middle of a main road during a curfew in Bombay during the '93 riots. Apparently, the Muslim rioter violation a Hindu girl. It was a really bad time for people in Bombay. I still remember the decapitation vividly. For interested parties, there is a nice film on this called Black Friday, a very good watch. Edit. Fix the link. Thanks for the tip. Rason. Am an obvious noob. Story 13. I'm a paraplegic with stage 4 decubitus ulcers, like bed sores. One of these got badly infected, making me very sick, sepsis. So with a fever of 105.5, I got into the car and drove myself to the hospital. Long story short, they didn't believe I was sick. The doc thought I was just showing up to get pain meds because I was young and paralyzed, and sent me home without even an exam. I was so cold when I got home that I got in the shower and blasted the warm water. My shower chair was shaped kind of like a toilet seat, so to make it easier to wash one's private parts. As I was sitting there, I noticed that I was bleeding into the tub. I reached down to see if the skin was still intact, and a large lump of flesh, about the size of a small fist, fell off of me into the tub. Needless to say, I went back to the hospital with my old parts in a bag, and they admitted me for a more than 6-month stay. Story 14. I grew up in an extremely ghetto part of West Virginia when I was a kid. It was basically boys in da hood IRL, just to give you the setting. One day, I was out in the neighborhood playing baseball with my friends when we saw an older kid named Lorenzo running by frantically. Lorenzo was a bit of a star in the neighborhood for being such a great ball player, so we all kind of looked up to him. At the time, it was becoming well known that he was getting caught up in selling crack, like most of the other kids his age that lived around me. After he ran by us, we chased him down the street because he looked like he was in trouble. After a while of us chasing after him and yelling for him to stop, he stopped right in front of our elementary school and turned to face us. He tried to catch his breath, and then all he said was, "They're going to eliminate me. I can't stop them. They're going to eliminate me." He reached into his pants and pulled out a small pistol. All in unison, my whole group of friends screamed, "No!" But he put it to his temple and blew his brains out of the other side of his head, all over the main entrance wall of the school. His body stood in place for a moment, while we all stared in shock. After what seemed like a slow-motion lifetime, his body tipped over like a tree and laid lifeless on the sidewalk. Hopefully, the most disturbing thing I will ever have to witness. Story 15. Watching a coworker have a heart attack and fall onto the table saw and have his chest ripped open. He was dead even if he didn't fall on the table saw. Massive heart attack. Next to seeing someone fall into an acid bath, he only burnt his leg. The smell off it was more horrifying. Note: I worked for my dad during my teenage years in an industrial complex. Story 16. A friend and I drove up on a semi stopped on a 4-lane. The child that had darted out in front of it got pancaked from the waist up and was lying there, uncovered. EMTs hadn't arrived yet. Edit. We stopped at a cafe a few blocks down, ordered Cokes, and just sat for a bit. I was feeling numb. Story 17. A man getting his head ripped off by his car flipping over right in front of me. Edit. I've read way worse stuff in this thread, but I'll share the story, I suppose. He was driving a small car with the sunroof open, and apparently he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. He was talking on his cell phone when he drifted to the right a bit, and the right side of his car hit a construction site mound of something at 60 since we were on the highway, and his head and his right shoulder got popped out of his window just in time for the weight of his entire car to come down on it and snap it off like a twig. My aunt called 911 and told him about the accident. It all happened so fast, she didn't have time to shield our eyes. Story 18. A friend and I were walking to the swimming pool for rookie lifeguard lessons, we were 14 at the time, and walked through the car park area to get to the front door of the pool center. We saw an ambulance crew surrounding what appeared to be a homeless man squatting with his trousers around his ankles. As we stopped for a second, morbid curiosity and all that, to see what was going on, the homeless man let out a pained scream and started pooing out what turned out to be his own rectum. Needless to say, it had a bit of an effect on me for quite some time whenever it came to using the loo. TLDR, my 14-year-old self watched a homeless man exhibit rectal prolapse whilst walking to the local pool. Story 19. Happened when I was a kid, brushing my teeth outside the house, right by our fence. Saw the neighbor's 5-year-old malnourished kid squat down right in their yard, not a few yards away from where I was standing, and shoot long strands of spaghetti. I was horrified, but couldn't move, kind of like being transfixed looking at an accident and not being able to look away. After the kid waddled away and left me standing there in wide-eyed horror, my eyes were drawn to the pile of spaghetti he left on their yard. The strands were moving. Worms. I ran back crying inside the house. Editilol, clarifications are in order, I guess. First off, I grew up in a rural farm community in one of the southern provinces in the Philippines. While most of the families within the community did okay relative to the economic situation, the neighboring family where I was raised was so dirt poor that their house was pretty much a shack. The kids ran around barefoot in the dirt yard every day, since the parents were off tilling the farms or working odd jobs. Second, I was brushing my teeth outside since we just finished eating lunch inside. My aunties were busy washing dishes in the sink, and my uncle was groaning in the bathroom. Third, yes, I did run in and tell the older folks about it, and they did talk to the kids' parents when they got back. Unfortunately, that's as far as it went. There are no child services in the third world, that I know of at least, and poor families like that barely have enough money to put food on their table, and basic hygiene pretty much takes a back seat during poverty. Story 20. I used to work at the front desk at a gym. One time, this guy was using the equipment and was sweating a bunch. It's courtesy to wipe the equipment off so no one else has to sit in your sweat. Well, two juice heads didn't approve of this. Some words came around, and one started holding the sweaty guy. Then I hear, "Hit him with the weight." One of the juice heads picked up a 20 lb weight and smacked him over the head with it. Then they ran out. The guy dropped to the floor and couldn't even hold his head. There was brain matter coming out. Luckily, someone that was in the gym was some kind of doctor and took control until the paramedics arrived. I should note that this gym is usually peaceful, and someone tried to stop the guy only to get punched in the stomach. I also happen to be really short and not muscular at all. Story 21. A few years back, my fiance and I were hit by a tipsy driver. Tipsy dude was going 70 mph in a 30 mph zone. He hit my fiance's side. I looked to my left and there was no fiance in sight, no driver's side door, nothing. I had a pretty major concussion and started wigging out, trying to get out of the car to find him. I thought I was trapped in the car when, in reality, the only thing holding me back was a seatbelt and locked door. I began screaming his name. I didn't even know if he was alive at this point. I was terrified. What felt like an eternity later, there he was trying to stand at the front of the car. He was bloody, limping, and out of it. His head was gashed open. Gashed open. There was blood all over his face and I could see his skull. At this point, I figured out how to unbuckle and unlock the door. He reached his hand up and gave it a WTF? Look, there was muscle and meat hanging from his hand. His shin was ripped open from knee to ankle. All of his front teeth were chipped and bleeding. This man, as mangled as he was, tried to come rescue me. It brings a tear to my eye just thinking about it, let alone typing it out. If anyone is wondering, he's fine now. TLDR saw the skull and other insides of my fiancé that one should not see. My dumbass thought I was trapped in a car when I wasn't, and he tried to rescue me. That's love, folks. Wall of text ninja edit.